Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Grant Brown, and I want to thank you so much for being here with us this week. We are all about to embark on an amazing journey starting in the fall, and I promise you it's going to be a journey. But what this program does for its students and for its staff and for its teachers is so amazing that it's almost unexplainable. What I'd like to do today is kind of take you on a personal journey of what exactly was going on in my life that made it so significant for me to need the AVID program when I did. I guess the easiest way to start is to start from the beginning. When I was about 5 years old, my mom took my little brother and I to a playground park in Lampasas, Texas. And we were there with some friends, having a good time, hanging out. And my mother pulled me to the side and she said, "Jonathan, I'm going to go across the street to a Winn-Dixie. I want you to stay here with your brother, and I'll be back." She said she was going to get some groceries for a picnic. And so my brother and I stayed, and she left. And it was pretty normal for us to see Mom go, and she always came back. So it wasn't unusual for us to stay in the park with these kids and continue to play. Well, eventually it started to get a little later, and kids started to trickle off, and parents started to go home. And my mother never came back. So for the next 2 nights, me and Tiger, we spent sleeping at that park. And on the second night, some police officers came by and they asked me, "What are you doing? Where are your parents?" And of course, I didn't want to get my mom in trouble. So at 5 years old, I had enough sense in my head to tell them that we had ran away from the babysitter. The police officer took us back to where I told him the babysitter lived, and needless to say, figured out what was going on. And I spent the next 14 years of my life growing up in foster care. Growing up in foster care for Tiger and I was very difficult simply because we learned at a very young age that our mother didn't want us and we never knew our father. So we figured no one could tell us what to do. You see, in foster care, we learned that they told us what to eat, where to sleep, and where to live, and even who to call Mom and Dad. So they controlled every aspect of our life. But the one thing they couldn't control was our behavior, and we used that to our advantage. You see, when Tiger would be acting up, I would act up. When Tiger would get in fights, I would get in fights. And it got so bad that eventually a judge decided to split us up. And we went 2 completely different ways. When I was about 9 years old, I was sitting in an ISP, which is an assessment of the foster child in the new home. And my caseworker came in with this letter from this lady named Marcia Grant. And I got excited because I knew that was my mother. And so she sat down and she started to read this letter to me. And in the letter it said, "I feel that Jonathan's life would be better lived and better afforded in foster care." And I didn't understand what that meant. So my caseworker explained to me, she said, "That's your mother relinquishing her rights. She's no longer your mother." How could you tell me this? How can one day she's my mom, and the next day, just because some judge decided, she's no longer my mother? So I didn't understand the words that were coming out of this lady's mouth, and I started to build this frustration and this anger towards these people who I thought took me from my mom. Because at 5 years old, I didn't want to leave the park because she said she was coming back, and she always came back. So I thought that because when she came back and I wasn't there, now she's mad at me, and that's why she doesn't want me. So I kept this anger and I kept this frustration, and I took it on to middle school. And middle school was probably the most difficult years of my life simply because I started to develop as a young man, and I was typically the more bigger kid in class. So anytime a problem presented itself to me, I dealt with it physically. Whether it be with a peer or a teacher or a friend or anything, I dealt with it physically. And that got me in more trouble. One of the most embarrassing things that I can remember in my life, I was coming into history class, into Mr. Cranford's history class, after lunch, and the intercom comes on, and it's the nurse. She says, "Can you please send Jonathan down to the clinic so he can take his medication?" And everyone started to laugh at me. Jonathan got to go take his crazy pills. And I was embarrassed, and I was frustrated, and I was angry. So I started to build these walls to keep these people away from me so that I wouldn't get close to them, and I wouldn't feel that hurt and that pain any longer. You see, it got really easy to be by myself, because if I was by myself, then I couldn't be disappointed, and I couldn't be let down, and you couldn't take no one from me because no one was with me. When I got into high school, I was presented with another problem. That problem was, in foster care, When you turn 18, you have to leave. You're on your own. Now, that's pretty stereotypical in American society. When you turn 18, you're supposed to spread your wings and fly, right? Well, in a normal American home, you can always come back to your mom's house for your birthday, for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, or just because. But in foster care, you can't. You see, for me, graduating from high school wasn't a goal. It wasn't something I wanted to accomplish because for me, graduating from high school meant the end. It was over. Thank God I was blessed with the opportunity halfway through my freshman year and in high school with the opportunity to be introduced to this program called AVID. And one of my teachers nominated me for it. And so I take this application into this lady's room. Her name is Paige Tallman, and I sit down in her office, and I'm talking to her about what I like to do and places I like to go and things sports I like to play. And I was telling her what I thought were all the right answers. And then the conversation got a little serious. You see, I never told anyone that I was in foster care until then, because I was so ashamed of the fact that my father left me before I even saw his face, and my mother didn't want me, so I kept it at bay, and I kept that secret. And Miss Tallman asked me, she said, "Jonathan, what do you want to do with your future?" I said, "Miss Tallman, I don't have a future." I said, "When I turn 18, I don't even have a family. So how could I possibly have a future?" And I expected her to feel sorry for me, because that's usually the response that you get when you tell someone something like that. "Oh, poor kid, whatever you need, we'll take care of it for you." But I never wanted anyone to feel sorry for me. I just wanted to be a regular kid with regular kid problems. Because if I was a regular kid, then no one would find out that I was a foster kid, and no one could make fun of me, and everybody would like me. Miss Tallman didn't feel sorry for me. She said, "You know what, Jonathan, there's a lot of things in life that you're gonna have to go through, I'm gonna have to go through. It's gonna make us sit back and think, God, why did this have to happen to me?" But she said, "You know what, it's those people who go through those struggles in life and they work hard at achieving their goals. They know what hard work feels like. Therefore, they will achieve their goals." And I believed her. And for the first time in a long time, I called someone something that felt so real. As a teacher, I know a lot of times you'll have a student in your classroom that says, "Hey, Mom." "Oh, I apologize. I didn't mean to." Well, the first time I was in Miss Tallman's classroom and I said, "Hey, Mom," I didn't want to take it back because it felt so right. She nurtured us and cared for us as if we were her children. She guided us in a direction that would provide a brighter future for us. And best believe, when we messed up, she checked us. But it was because she stepped into the life of a young man who was searching so hard for a place to belong, and she allowed it to happen. She allowed me to go into a place where I felt safe, where I felt like I didn't have to fight anymore. It's funny to think that two brothers can grow up in the same place and have the same thing happen to them and wind up in two completely different directions. As I said, I was introduced to the AVID program in high school, got all the way through high school, graduated, went on to college, and graduated with honors, and now I'm working on my master's. But you see, my little brother Tiger, he went to a boys' group home, and then to a mental institution, and then for the past 5 years, he's been locked up in prison. So it is a challenge that I present to you all today. It is our obligation, our duty, to no longer allow our brothers and sisters to slip through the cracks, because we can save one. We can save one, and we can inspire one, and we can encourage him to seek a future. God bless you for it. But we have to get as many as we can. Thank you.